Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, nice to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Very good. I guess you heard that James
Comey.
I can't remember the guy's name.
You're so upset over it.
He used to be in the FBI. Comey all of a sudden got fired last night. Everybody in the country knows it, and I'm the one that doesn't even know his name. But he's an important person. But he's gone now, so everything is going to be hunky dory. But there's a lot of grandstanding going on. You know what I find fascinating is the people who really hated Comey a month or two ago now love him, and why did they fire this wonderful guy? And they're politicizing this. I can't believe it that this is becoming just a political event. So this is sort of sad what's going on, but I think pretty serious. But it does invite some real serious thinking about what is the purpose of the FBI, and are they fulfilling the purpose, and was this guy doing it, and was he just doing more of the same, politicizing a very important function of government, and a function that shouldn't exist, and that is investigating and spying on everybody. So in a way, it's a big event, and there's a lot of discussion, and everybody has an opinion, and it's a big job to sort out the politics of this versus what really needs to be done. My position is rather easy to take because I don't think he should have been there in the first place, and throwing him out is fine with me. The circumstances, I think, carry a lot of weight on how it's going to be played out and what are the motivations and this sort of thing. But since I don't have high regard for agencies like the FBI, to change the leader is okay with me, except it really doesn't change a whole lot. You still have all these thousands of FBI agents, 35,000 of them, and they don't stop working, and they keep creating new work for themselves. So that'll continue, and they'll get a new FBI director soon. But in the meantime, what's your assessment of all this? Is this good news or bad news for the country?
Well, I have to admit that I enjoyed being on Twitter yesterday and watching a lot of these, as you say, the politicization. You have people like Schumer and so many others who said, this is outrageous, it's a constitutional crisis. And then people would retweet their tweets from a couple of months ago saying, Comey has to go, he's politicized the thing. So it just goes to show the hypocrisy in Washington, that he's a hero when he does your bidding and he's a heel when he doesn't.
Right. Well, immediately when things come up like this, they get the attention of just about everybody, instantaneously. I'm thinking, oh, what are they doing elsewhere? Is there something else going on? Could it be a distraction? Could there be some collusion? I even had that thought back when Watergate was going on. I thought, well, maybe there's bigger events going on. And actually, there was a bigger event going on back then, and it had to do with the economy. It was in total shambles. But we dealt with Nixon, who was committing minor infractions compared to what has gone on in our country today. But I think there are some things that are going on that are significant. We should at least recognize that there are other things in the news. And I think two big things in the news yesterday that came out it has been, are there going to be more troops going to Afghanistan? And what are we doing with the Kurds? We poked a little fun at it last week about, why is one ally fighting another one of our allies? Whose side are we on? Well, right now, it looks like a balancing act. We had given weapons and all and close allies with Turkey. Now we're talking about sending weapons to the Kurds. So those things are pretty significant, but I think there'll be less, people sorting that out, especially today and tomorrow and the next week or two, because it looks like this is going to be a grand political thing to go on. And there's people who switch their votes. For some reason, they won't suffer much consequences just because a month ago they thought the guy was a scoundrel and now he's a saint. They have no shame.
Yeah. Maybe it's an overused word, but we talked about before the show. What's the deep state really up to? As you're saying, what are they doing? And what's actually, I think, rather depressing is, with some exceptions, all of the progressives, all the people on the left we may find in alliance against the war, are now obsessed with this whole crazy idea, cockamamie idea, that Trump did this because he wanted to divert attention away from the fact that he was colluding with the Russians, which makes absolutely no sense because it drew everyone's attention to that ridiculous conclusion. But why is this happening? You're right. While the progressives who should be with us are obsessing about Russia, Afghanistan, big time ramping up. Arming the Kurds with heavy weapons. How are the Turks going to take that? What happens the next time the Turks bomb the Kurds and they have heavy weapons that we gave them and they fire back? The meeting today between Lavrov and Tillerson, which may pave the way toward better relations and a solution in Syria. Monetary crisis. What is it? No one's going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about this guy.
Well, it looks like the people in charge are willing to go along with greater attacks on Iran and backing off a little bit with Russia. Evidently, there's a pragmatic decision on that, and it's fitting the bill, and maybe they want to do that with less notice, and they're doing it under these circumstances, and Tillerson will be talking to Lavrov today, and maybe there will be a much better relationship. Maybe truly peace may come to Syria in a much more serious way than has happened, in the last, 5 more years since 2011. So it's about time something like that happened. But it's always spin. They talk about spin. How do we do this? And they always they call it spin, and they try to soften the tone. But really, it's mostly flat out lying. Yeah. When they lie us into war and all these problems, it isn't just modification in tone. It literally is deceiving the people. And this, of course, this doesn't mean that what's happening at the FBI isn't serious. But I also think this whole process brings up the subject, how important is the FBI? I mean, it is powerful, and we know that it's just, 100 and some years old and was started, during Teddy Roosevelt's term in office, which is no surprise. And they don't have a very good record. Anybody who should be suspect of an investigative arm of a government like an FBI and trust it, all they have to do is read this life and story about J. Edgar Hoover. Yeah. But in the tradition, I don't think that the actual tradition that was set by Hoover is dead and gone. I think it's subtle, it's different. They have more machinery, but Hoover really loved this stuff. He was infatuated with collecting data, and he did it for all those years, and nobody really challenged him because he was the biggest blackmailer there ever was, a political blackmailer in the world, and he had something on everybody, and he had gobs of files, and now we're talking about, a little bit of wiretapping where they have so much more access. I would say that in many ways, Hoover was a disgrace, but that sentiment has continued. It still exists in the FBI.
Yeah, the system's still there, even if the head is gone. I just finished a piece that Jim Bovard wrote back in 2012, a good friend of ours, and he pointed out that Congress tried to prohibit Teddy Roosevelt from starting the FBI because he was afraid they were afraid it would trample the Constitution. Imagine that. Congress at one time stood up for the Constitution. But he worked his way around it, as we talked about. But here's something that is really interesting. If you think about the FBI started out very, very small, but where did it really get its traction? With war, World War I. World War I and the Espionage Act came, and that really gave them a shot in the arm. And then they really went to town, started arresting all kinds of Americans who they thought were against the war, who spoke up against the government in times of war. And so war really empowered the FBI.
That is true. The one thing that I found out was that Hoover, in 1939, was accumulating the names of a lot of German American citizens and Japanese American citizens in case they needed to be rounded up in World War II, which of course didn't start for 2 more years.
Wow.
But they were accumulating names, and that's the deep state planning back then.
Yeah, and very shortly after it formed, they also started investigating Congress itself.
Yeah.
The FBI did. They wanted to look for members who were threats to America, as Bovard wrote. They targeted the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman because the FBI was afraid that he favored diplomatic recognition of Russia, of Soviet Russia.
Right.
They were so terrible. It's like this history repeating itself.
You know, the founders warned against the standing army, and I think this is. We have the standing army. We have the nationalization of the police force, and the FBI has 35,000 in their army. But that is even small when you look up everything else under the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, we are an armed state against the people. There's probably more people patrolling our streets from the federal government than the horrible mess we're doing overseas. You know, and what do they do? That we end up losing. We're supposed to be fighting and getting involved to protect our Constitution and our liberties. At the same time, these standing armies and the FBI getting involved in all of this accumulation of material. It's just astounding that we can't, separate this issue from, good government, because we'll be interpreted because we haven't, bowed to the FBI as the greatest instrument ever. You guys are un-American. What is it? Well, maybe being an American means you believe in civil liberties and believe in limited government. You don't believe in world government. You don't believe in the empire. You believe that our liberties ought to be protected as the prime responsibility of government, and not much else. So that's, to many people, it's just un-American, because I don't know whether it would be as sacred as it is when you say that the troops shouldn't be overseas. Oh, you're against the troops. You're against America. You blame America first. And at the same time, it depends on what you believe America is. What is upholding the standards for America? And that's where there's a lot of confusion, because a lot of people think that standing up for America is tough maintenance and control of our empire and our interests. Of course, the interests will be, financial, business interests in oil and natural resources.
And even if you would concede that there should be a federal police force, there aren't really that many federal laws in the Constitution, are there?
Well, that is interesting, because precisely in the original document there are 3 that gives the authority to the Congress to deal with, and that is treason, counterfeiting, and piracy. And well, that's not too bad. We can grant that much authority. It's interesting about the counterfeiting, of course. Who are the biggest counterfeiters in the world now? But there's been one add, and that, of course, is slavery. But you and I have tried to figure out exactly how many laws there might be out there, and it's hard to get an exact number. Could be 20 or 1,000 plus or minus actual laws. But then when you try to figure out the regulation, they're unlimited, hundreds of thousands. Some people say 100,000, and I think they make them up as they go along. Some say it could be 300,000. So they can prosecute anybody for anything, and they can create a problem. And the judicial system, the system of the grand jury is, I think, so distorted from what it was supposed to be. The saying goes, which really tells you the attitude that a lot of people think about. They said a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
They can do anything they want, and they work like this with the FBI, and the FBI, does the bidding of the Justice Department, and they do a lot of things. But one thing that I personally resent as a power that they have, which is so intrusive, and that's the attitude of entrapment, entrapping some evil people, and most of the time they're susceptible people, and they have them all analyzed. Oh yeah, I think we can get him to do that, and what is it? An entrapment means the government breaks the law. And it gets people to almost break the law, then they arrest them. Oh, we just stopped this major event.
Yeah, it's a psychological operation against American citizens. But you're right, they'll take some marginalized member of society. I forget the most recent one, but the guy didn't even have enough money to get a pair of shoes, so they bought him some shoes. They bought him all the stuff to make a bomb, and then they said, look, we captured a bomb maker.
Yeah, and claim this great credit. Well, I would not be upset if we didn't have an FBI. But most people will say, you don't believe in any intelligence. No, I believe in intelligent gathering of intelligence, and not to give power to a select group working in privacy, and of course the CIA is involved in this as well. But I think it's proper to know what other people are doing. But most of the significant events is just observations, that are important to us, or people coming forth and telling us what happens, that we don't have to have wiretaps on every single person. Right now, it's been said, and I believe it, that every electronic communication of every American citizen is recorded someplace.
Yeah, exactly. And they say that the average American commits 3 felonies a day. I know you've heard this and everything, and it's terrifying in a way because it's intimidating to think that. But does that mean that we're that evil? We're such terrible people that we commit all these? No, it means that there are too many federal laws that are out there to be violated.
The circumstances now is inviting a clamor, a political clamor. Well, this is wonderful. Now we can get a special prosecutor and solve all the problems. This will be just wonderful. And to me, it reminds me of, we don't know what happened with the Kennedy assassination, and we don't know what happened on the 9/11 bombing. And what we need is a commission. We'll set up the commission and we'll settle it. Commissions settles all questions. So what we're going to have is a special prosecutor, a clamor for it. And of course, there's different ways to do it and getting different authorities, but you still have to have somebody picking the perfect individuals out there that are not political, never heard anything about it, has no axe to grind. And the commissions, I've always assumed they're cover-up. The people who are in charge or has some influence to make sure that government doesn't get blamed. And the political struggle is ongoing. Which party wields power? It never has a philosophy. They're not going to have, a special prosecutor or a special investigation to find out the wisdom of the FBI. It will always be which power group has control, and they will argue over this power. So my guess would be that they will succumb to setting up a special prosecutor, even if most of the pressure comes from the people who not too long ago hated Comey, this sort of thing.
Well, a lot of the special prosecutor, special investigator has to do with the Russia issue because, as we said earlier on, the whole idea is that he fired Comey to get rid of this Russia investigation. But someone else said this yesterday. He fired the head of the FBI, but he didn't fire the FBI. And there are still hundreds and hundreds of investigators looking into this Russiagate thing. So the whole idea that Comey was fired to put this out, and therefore we need a special investigator, a special prosecutor, is just simply bogus.
Well, what's your bottom line on this? Do you think this is a net positive, just getting this out on the table and allowing the people to sort it all out, or is this going to be just more trouble?
I think it's only a net positive if people watch this show and realize it's not about who heads the FBI, it's about the FBI itself.
That is absolutely right, and it's important who is running it, not the whole organization, but it's the principle. Should we have one? I argue this case all the time with the Federal Reserve. People will ask me specifically, well, what do you think of Bernanke, and what do you think of the head of the Fed, Yellen? And I said, well, she's not doing the right thing because she doesn't know what the right thing is, but she's not the issue. The issue is the Federal Reserve System. You can't make it run efficiently if it's not well thought out, it doesn't have a good purpose. And that's the way with FBI. If you can't just change the manager, there's probably a lot of good people trying to do what is right in the FBI and the CIA, but it's a system that is just overly tempting to be abused, and we're at this stage right now. I think this is a good example of something that is very predictable, that eventually it would come out in the open that they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. I think Comey was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. He was coming out and he politicized this and had press conferences about an investigation. He was on this side one time. I might have given too much help for that candidate. Well, I better go out and help this other candidate, and flip-flop on that, and then it leads to chaos. And it was an attempt to be fair and balanced. He might have been very sincere in doing that, but he shouldn't have been doing it. The temptation shouldn't even been there. We shouldn't have this FBI that is so intrusive, gathering so much information, which is a violation of the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment. They should be trying to help us enforce the Fourth Amendment, if anything, but not to go out and just make things worse. And that's what's happened before. So a reassessment of the FBI and taking a hint, study J. Edgar Hoover and think, well, maybe he did set the standard, and maybe the standards haven't improved much since he was in office. Then we might say, well, maybe we should challenge, this whole concept of what the FBI and the CIA ought to be doing, just as we should challenge the whole concept of managed money by our central bank. That would be progress. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.